Hello everyone, today we'll be going over the database catalog. So this should be a pretty important component of your milestone 1 for your project. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So what exactly is the database catalog at a sort of high level? So a pretty good definition is that the database catalog is a snapshot of a database that persists important metadata such as the database and column names, table sizes, column sizes, and so forth. The database catalog can be stored on disk in multiple formats. For instance, .txt is a pretty popular format, and we'll go over a little bit more about how exactly you would write or read to a file on disk. So why is the catalog necessary? Perhaps you guys might have discussed in lecture the difference between persistent and non-persistent data, as well as the database catalog and like in contrast the variable pool. So essentially, the database must be able to persist salient data upon shutdown commands, and so this is important because the catalog stored information should be sufficient so that on startup the database can resume per usual. So that is like on the shutdown commands, we'll issue a shutdown command from like your clients, and your server must be able to receive that command. And before it shuts down, it has to store important metadata so that when it starts back up, it's able to identify which columns, for instance, map to which column names, which tables have which columns, and so forth. So this is an example table that was taken from lecture. You can see we have a table that's called employee and has ID, which is of data type int, has name, which is of data type varchar, and so forth. So fortunately for you guys, you won't have to handle multiple data types. Everything that you need to persist will be ints. However, these column names are important because our select and our select queries and a lot of our other queries are going to be actually passing in table and column names. So persisting these names and understanding which or remembering, your database must remember which columns actually correspond to these column names as well. So how exactly, sort of as a walkthrough, could the catalog be implemented? So there's mainly two steps. On shutdown, our database must write to the catalog file, and on startup, our database must read from that file. So we can open a catalog file via fopen, and again, this could be a .txt file, or it can be really any file of your choosing, anything that can store just raw bytes or text, depending on how you choose to implement it. And then we can write important metadata to the catalog file via fprintf, and I guess you sort of have to informally define some sort of protocol. So for instance, if the first thing you write is the database name, then you must remember that that's the first thing that should be read. Okay, and then on startup, we want to open that same catalog file via fopen, and we're assuming that this is not like the first time you start up, in which case you probably would have like an empty data catalog. And then we want to parse the written metadata into active data structures, and so these are your table structs or your database struct or your column structs. Some last considerations to think about. What exactly should be stored in the catalog versus in the variable pool? So I think you guys might have discussed in lecture that the variable pool would be storing things like intermediate variables, so data that doesn't need to be persisted, but that just needs to be alive while a client is connected to the server. And then another question to think about is the optimal serialization and data format of catalog data so that upon startup, bringing the database catalog and loading its values is as fast as possible. An interesting thing to know about the database catalog is it doesn't really need to be optimized too much, and the reason for this is you just need to write to the database catalog once while you're when you're shutting down, and you have to read from it once when you're starting up. So it's not like if your process is too slow, it's not going to affect like every single query. However, it would be interesting to think about the optimal formats in order to just make these processes faster, just for the sake of performance. Cool. So that's it for this section. Hope everyone was able to learn a bit more about the database catalog. If you have any questions, please post on Ed or come to lab, and we'll get right back to you.